What we need to provide is an emotionally safe environment for our partner and our family. We men suck at this. I've been talking about the Manosphere, and I think this applies to dating as well. It's really important that we
It's the Kink Consultant Podcast, where we're turning up the heat on all things kink and dating, relationships, and pop culture. So close the door, plug in your headphones, and let's get down to it. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Kink Consultant Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Dames. I'm going to start off with an apology. A few weeks ago, I had an amazing dating coach on the podcast, and we spoke about dating and men and women and masculinity and femininity in general. And I know that some of the ways we talked about masculinity rubbed some people the wrong way. And I really didn't mean to do that. So I was like, what is happening with the word masculinity right now? What is happening with the masculine and the feminine? And why are we moving away from these words that have become quite polarizing? So I went on a hunt to find the right person to talk to help me better understand masculinity and femininity and what's changing about these words and how we live our lives at the moment. So today I'd like to introduce Matt Salis. He is a behavioral health writer and researcher with over a decade of experience in addiction and emotional abuse fields. He has a master's degree in sexual health, and he is a leading expert on intimacy and committed partnerships that are impacted by traumatic dynamics like alcoholism and emotional abuse. Matt himself co-hosts the Untoxicated podcast, and I've invited him on today because I want to get in toxic masculinity versus what the right emotional masculinity is. So Matt, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Amanda. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
So, Matt, you have a master's in sexual health. My first question is, what made you specialize in sexual health?
So I work with couples and individuals who have experienced things like alcoholism, and those things have damaged relationships. And we live in an interesting time. People are more willing than in the past to talk about addiction. I mean, I think we've all recognize that addiction in many forms is just kind of a tsunami coming at us, especially with technology and porn and like this is not something we can ignore any longer. So people are really open and willing to talk about addiction. And as it relates to how it damages relationships, they tend to talk pretty openly right up to the bedroom door. And then that's when people tend to get quiet and reserved, and the vulnerability ends. And so I realized if I'm going to learn as much about the impact of things like alcoholism and emotional abuse on intimacy, I'm going to have to get some formal education because it's still taboo. It's still kind of a little bit off limits. So I decided that was a great place to spend my kind of education, formal education time. And so that's what caused me to pursue that master's degree.
I love it, and it does make so much sense. I always say that people love having sex. Nobody likes talking about sex, at least not in the real vulnerable ways that it requires to, funnily enough, have good sex. Were you doing the addiction work before you did the master's, and it sort of just lent itself to that being the right course for you?
Yeah, it sure did. I myself am a recovered alcoholic. I knew the damage that my drinking had done to my relationship in all aspects, including intimacy. I would find in working with other people, I'd find that a lot of things resonated, and I would learn from them as much as they would learn from me on all these topics like the emotional side, nervous system stuff, ways that the relationship had been damaged, the damage done to the kids. And the piece of it where I wasn't finding people willing to express themselves was on the intimacy side. So I looked for a program that really met my needs for not only what I had experienced, but would allow me to take what I had experienced and communicate it in the best way possible back out to people. I wanted to validate some of my experiences and my assumptions and know that I wasn't just like an oddball before I started talking openly and widely about my experiences.
I love that you went down the path of let me validate things first, because I think in the world of social media, myself included, we are very keen to just go on and talk about our experience. And sometimes we forget, well, that's my perspective, and I'm not sure it's validated. And we ultimately get it probably from social media sometimes. So I love that you took the academic route to make sure it was validated.
I learned a little bit about the research process when I was in school. And several of my professors said, internally, we don't call it research, we call it me-search. Because if somebody is willing to invest that kind of time and money and do a deep dive on something in an academic research way, in many cases, not always, it's something they've experienced personally. And so that was the case for me. And the program that I chose, while it had kind of a broad overview, it allowed me to really dig deep. They encouraged me to do my master's research efforts to focus on the impact of things like alcoholism and other addictions on the intimate side of the relationship. So it was a really good fit.
So is that where Sober Evolution came from? Did that come out of your master's degree?
Yeah, the book is titled Sober Evolution. I wrote it before I got the master's degree. There are 3 kind of sections to the book: my alcoholism, my recovery, so very me-centered, and then the impact on the relationship. And while we do talk about intimacy in the book, it's not the deep dive that I'm capable of doing now after having done the education.
Okay, so there might be a 2.0 version or a new book coming soon.
I'm working on another book right now that's really on the topics that we're talking about: emotional safety and emotional masculinity. The book that I'm working on right now is presenting like 20 case studies of people who have had addiction and emotional abuse destroy their relationships and what they've done to come out the other side. And there's certainly intimacy pieces that are woven through the stories.
Oh, amazing. All right, well, I cannot wait for that. That's the perfect segue. Let's get into it. You heard my intro. We talked a little bit about a previous episode that I did with an amazing dating coach who I respect a lot. But, I didn't understand the depth of what's happening with the word masculinity and what's happening in society with masculinity right now. We touched on this in the pre-interview a little bit, but the manosphere, I think, is something to blame. So I find you to be more of an expert than I am. Can you talk about this negative world that is the manosphere right now?
Yeah, you bet. I believe that what's going on with technology and AI specifically is kind of covering up what is actually the biggest revolution that's taken place during my lifetime. In my lifetime, women have gained sexual autonomy, they've gained financial independence, they've gained educational superiority, intellectual equality. The year I was born, my mother-in-law had to get her father to co-sign on a checking account because she was recently divorced. And I'm not even talking about credit. I'm talking about she wasn't even allowed to go to the bank and put her own money in and write checks on it. In 1997, when I was in college, it was still legal in some states in the United States for a man to rape his own wife. The degree to which we've had massive advancements for women. And I know we're in a period right now where it feels like some of that's being clawed back and women are losing rights. I'm hopeful, I'm prayerful that that's a blip and that the progress will continue. I think that it really will. But in 50 years, we've made incredible progress as it relates to the freedom and the rights and the evolution, really, of women. And men, we are lost in a fog with how to deal with that. We have not responded well. And I think we have to step up and respond. And what I'm seeing out there are 3 approaches. One approach is just to lament and complain and whine about the fact that as a man, I can't get a woman to be attracted to me and the old things don't work and they changed and change is somehow bad. Like we're all supposed to change. We're all supposed to advance. And the fact that that is viewed as a negative is just befuddling to me. The second approach that some men are taking is the manosphere stuff. Let me double down on traditional forms of masculinity. What a woman really wants is for a man to lead. And so I need to be dominant in the bedroom. I need to be dominant as it relates to who makes the decisions in the relationship and parenting. And if I can just get buff in the gym and invest in crypto, then every woman is going to be just begging to be a part of my life. And that's going to solve all my problems. It's just another grift. It's just another take people who are hurting, in this case, men, and convince them I've got the solution to all your problems. Here's the snake oil you need to buy. So I think the manosphere stuff is really, really troubling. I think it's hopefully semi-short term, and it absolutely has no chance of success. So what I've started to focus on is what I think is the third. Yeah, there's no way it's going to be successful. The degree to which it drags us down is the real question. But I think there's a third way. I think we need to acknowledge and celebrate the advancements made by women. And then as men, we need to evolve as well. We can't just continue to be Archie Bunker, right? And come home after work and sit on the couch and drink beer and complain that dinner isn't on the table on time. No woman is attracted to that anymore. I've done research myself within our organization that shows that what women are looking for before they're in a relationship is signaling of emotional safety. And what they're looking for once they're in a relationship is emotional safety. It's not the financial side. Women aren't looking for a man to go out and earn a paycheck for them anymore. And so we have to evolve. We can still be masculine, but we need to be emotionally masculine. And so the three kind of buzzwords related to masculinity are provide, protect, and lead. We can still take those thousands or millions or however you look at it, years of ingrained and genetically passed down instincts to provide, protect, and lead. We just have to point them in a different direction. And so for me, what we need to provide is an emotionally safe environment for our partner and our family. And that includes a low anxiety home life without raised voices. We need to protect our partner and our family from comparison, critique, and criticism, all the stuff that thrives on social media. And at least within the household, we need to have limited teasing and limited negativity and create that safe environment. And then we need to lead resentment processing, trauma processing, and emotionally intimate conversations. And this is an area, Amanda, we men suck at this. But this is our work. This is our work. We have to evolve. We have to step up. We have to meet women in the moment.
I love everything you just said. I do think those not already captured into the manosphere who are younger than us, the younger generation, I actually think are much better emotionally than even like my partner is 33 years old. And even though it's only like 4.5 years younger than me, I already notice a huge shift in how he and his friends talk about emotion and talk about things. So I think that it is potentially getting better. What can we as women look out for? How can men signal that they are emotionally safe in a way that is grounded, that doesn't necessarily match up to, I guess, what society has always thought of as masculine, but still signals what women are looking for?
Ooh, that's a big question. In addition to what we've talked about, I coach college and high school soccer, men and women. And what I say to the women all the time is you have to demand respect in all of your engagements, in all of your relationships, professional, romantic, friendships, otherwise, and just have zero tolerance for any of the kind of old school misogynistic grossness. Other than that, I think the work is on the side of the men. I don't think women have a lot to do other than to demand to be treated the way they deserve to be treated in all their relationships. The signaling comes from the way we treat our partners and potential partners well into the relationship, not only just at the beginning, but it has to continue. I like to say the thing that turned my marriage around was when I started treating my wife like we were always on a second date. So I'm still being polite. I'm still being courteous. I'm not walking through the kitchen and slapping her on the ass or grabbing her boob. I mean, there's room for that kind of playfulness, but my wife has to be in the mood. And if she's not, all that is taken at is objectification, and it's not welcome. And so one of the problems that happens is we get comfortable in relationships and then we drop that kind of second date. I like to use the acronym ABD, always be dating. When we drop the ABD acronym and we start treating each other with too much comfort, we're losing that emotional safety. We are losing the thing that our partner probably found attractive from us in the first place. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense. I was just having a conversation with my own partner recently about when you lose that, what happens is it's not even like you're becoming like friends. You're actually becoming like siblings because you have the closeness. Like you fight with your siblings in a different way than you fight with your friends. Keeping that respect and that second date energy keeps the closeness, the focus on intimacy, and then also that respect that you're talking about. So I love that analogy. Always be dating each other. It makes complete sense.
Well, and I love that you bring in the analogy of it's like the way you treat a sibling, because who wants to have sexy time with a sibling, right? Talk about pouring cold water
Definitely
on it.
not.
I'm going to do anything I can to keep my relationship from resembling a sibling relationship.
Yeah, because so when he said that, I was mind blown because I was like, you're right. We all talk about how we're like roommates. A lot of people, especially who I coach who are in relationships.
I hear it too.
Like,
yeah.
Oh, we're like roommates, but it's not even that. It's like siblings because you do have that closeness. At least with my roommates, I clean my dishes. Like I don't leave my dishes in the sink because there is still a level of respect there. But I've never thought about it like that in terms
Yeah.
of just having that respect. And I would say even standing up for myself, sometimes even in the workplace, it was easier to just laugh off some types of jokes or comments than it was to address them. But it is important to stand up and say, hey, I deserve respect and don't talk to me like that.
What's interesting about that, demanding respect, standing up. So we work with a lot of people who their relationship needs a lot of repair work. They've been through something bad, alcoholism or otherwise, some kind of trauma, right? The most important thing people can do in relationship recovery is to detach from the relationship and work on themselves as individuals. Because what happens when we work on ourselves as individuals is we start to build self-esteem. And a person with high self-esteem is not going to tolerate abuse, emotional or otherwise, that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so by kind of default, strengthens the relationship, but not because they're working on the relationship, because they're working on themselves.
Another thing you said was the work is on the men's side to address this and be emotionally safe themselves. I want to jump right into it. Have you ever worked with anyone who had that toxic version of masculinity or that ideal that had been passed down to them that you saw do the work and really integrate a more emotional side to themselves?
It's funny because in most cases, we meet the female partner in a heterosexual relationship first, and she's into what we're saying, and she brings her male partner in. And the first reaction we always get is, who the hell's this guy? What's this guy slinging? And so there's a lot of distrust for me right off the bat. Some men, I just don't think they're picking up what we're laying down. But for the ones that are open-minded and curious and they start to buy in, I think they find a great deal of success from understanding the damage they've done in their relationship. And I'm not just talking about alcohol and alcoholism. I'm talking about being kind of traditionally masculine. Let me give you an example. And this is the way I was raised, in a very patriarchal home. My dad was the boss. He made all the big decisions. He handed down the punishment. He was the disciplinarian. The worst thing my mom could ever say is, wait till your dad gets home. That meant my sister and I, we were in big time trouble, right? So that's the environment I grew up in. And that's the environment that I started out with in my family. And so what that meant for me is I kind of rule the roost. This is my safe zone. So I would come home and let's say I wasn't upset with anyone in my family, but I had a really bad day, and I would rant and rave about my boss, and I would complain about that. And then I'd flip on the television and I'd be so mad about politics, I'd be screaming at the TV screen. And then I'd relax into my recliner and I'd be watching the game, and my team was losing. And so I'm screaming at the TV screen about a professional sporting event or something. So all my experience that my family gets with me is this tyrant, just kind of stomping through the world like this is my world and you're just living in it. And even when I'm not aggressive toward them, the anxiety in the household goes up and just everything is uncomfortable. A great measure of whether kids feel safe or not, kids feel comfortable in their own house, is whether they spend any time in the common areas or not. And at this point, my kids were all in their rooms behind closed doors because the less time they could spend with me, the better. And all the while, I've never criticized them. I've never yelled at them. I've never punished them. So I think I'm golden. I think I'm God's gift to fatherhood, right? And so it's a big transition that we men have to make when we talk about the work is on the men's side to become emotionally masculine. We have to change everything we've been taught, everything we've known, everything we've picked up from the generations before us. In addition to that, lead, provide, and protect, there's a few other points to emotional masculinity that I think are really important. I think it's important that we be of service. Being in relationship, being in family, it's not about scorekeeping or whataboutism. It's about providing more than maybe I take out from the relationship. And that's hard for a lot of men to do. Like, we're competitive, right? And we, I did this for my wife, but what did she do for me? We've got to lose that attitude. We've got to want to be a provider of whatever services we can. Accountability is huge. In what I have found in working with people in relationships, besides emotional safety, the thing that partners most want from their partners is for them to take accountability when something has gone wrong. And they don't even have to be accountable as in, I'm going to own all the blame. But accountability also means fixing the problem no matter who is to blame. And so that's a big part of emotional masculinity, is wanting to be part of the solution no matter who caused the problem. And then resilience. Amanda, I don't know what you see, but you talked about generations and newer generations. I think you're right. I think my kids are a lot more in touch. My boy kids are a lot more in touch with their emotions at their age than I was when I was their age. That's great. But what we are missing is the resilience to understand we just got to have grit. I mean, things aren't going to go well all the time. In fact, probably the majority of the time, we're going to be fighting an uphill battle, and having the grit to overcome anyway. That's a really important part of masculinity, and it can be folded into this concept of emotional masculinity, and it fits. It's just seamless.
Okay, you have me at grit 100%. I agree that I do think that's missing, and the resilience. Sometimes it feels like you're fighting a losing battle, but that's also sometimes just life. And it's perspective, and it's wins and appreciating them. You mentioned one of the first points you just made there is putting in more than you're taking out, right?
Mhm.
And just putting in that work and not keeping score. Can you talk to me about what benefits can people expect to see when they're doing this? Because even I understand and think, well, how do you not get taken advantage of? How is it equality if you're not keeping score? So what are the benefits of like that balance of let me make sure I'm putting in more?
Yeah, I think equality in a relationship is a myth. I think it's a false goal. I think acknowledgement is more important. So even though I am a huge proponent of this concept of emotional masculinity, and I think that the advances of women are the most important thing that's happened in my lifetime, my wife and I still fall into some of the traditional gender roles in our relationship. My wife likes to cook. She went to culinary school. Like, she really likes to cook, and she does all the cooking, right? I can make eggs. I can boil pasta, but for the most part, she does all the cooking. And, I do the yard work, and she tends the garden with the flowers, right? So we still do some of that, but I don't sit down and try to see if the work that she is doing, whether it's work at home or work outside the home, the kind of work that you earn a paycheck for, I don't try to equate those two. What I try to do is acknowledge where she's putting in a lot, and she does the same for me. So rather than working toward equality, it's all about the acknowledgement. So we parent differently. This is maybe a really good example. I really think my kids are teens and 20s. I really think that my job as a father is to help them become independent, which is a lot more hands off. My wife is a born nurturer. You talked about masculinity and femininity. The component of femininity that I spend a lot of time on and talk a lot about is the nurturing component of femininity. I think that is huge and needs to be celebrated and honored. And so, like, it's snowing and we live a mile from the high school. I want them to walk in the snow and get themselves there. Her mama heart wants to drive them. And so we have to negotiate that. We have to find a balance. I have to respect her nurturing instinct, while at the same time she respects my instinct to try to help them become independent. And so the idea that we're going to be equal in a relationship, it's just impossible. There are things she's going to do that I don't even think are important. So I'm not going to do those things. At the same time, on the flip side, I can get really locked in on a work project and I can work round the clock on it. And I don't expect my wife to do the same thing on her work stuff just to level up. So she will acknowledge, God, I can see how hard you're working on this thing. And I appreciate what you're doing for the family in that regard. And I can turn around and say, I see that you cook all our meals and that you make sure the kids are safe. Sometimes the existence of the kids, escapes my mind, I'm embarrassed to say, when I'm locked in on something else. And you're making sure that things are locked in. Now, you have to be careful, though, with this, right? Because there's this whole mental load concept. I can't just expect my wife to take care of everything on the home front and then peace out. I have to acknowledge that she's doing more. I have to help where I can. I have to ask what she needs. But the idea that we're going to sit down and scorekeep and try to make it equal, I think that's a false goal. I don't think that works.
Okay, you are answering questions before I even get to ask them. So I love that. I did want to talk about mental load, right? Because there is a lot of, I don't have kids. I'm not married. I do live with my partner. That's life sort of on easy mode, right? Because the mental load is our individual lives that we don't have to think about each other's. But that mental load piece of, well, I want you to make a list for me of things to do to help you. And the person with the higher mental load is like, I don't even want to have to make a list. Even without equality, how do you find a fairness in that? Like, is it acknowledging that there is a higher mental load? How do you help without infantilizing yourself of like, well, I don't even know what to do, if that makes sense?
It does. It's a ton of communication. It's a ton of respect. It is absolutely. I think that acknowledgement piece is huge. The other thing that my wife and I do and that we promote with folks that we work with is this idea of resentment processing. Resentment processing can be something that you do when you're coming back from a big trauma. Resentment processing means, let's say my wife has a resentment that she wants to share with me. I need to be a good listener. I need to not try to deflect it. I need to not try to explain it away. I can't DARVO, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with that concept, that acronym, but it basically means, oh yeah, you're upset about this. Well, listen to the thing I'm upset about. Like, there's no place for that. Resentment processing is I'm going to be a good listener. I'm going to validate your experience. I may or may not apologize depending on the circumstance, but I'm going to acknowledge that that sounds hard. That can go for big traumas, but it can also be the everyday little things. My wife and I continue, even though our relationship is a million times better than it was when I was drinking or when I was in early sobriety and we had a ton of work to do. We still resentment process every week. We spend some time saying, hey, what's something that's bothering you? What happened this week that you didn't like? And often it has to do with mental load or share of responsibilities. Hey, I did X, Y, and Z and you didn't even notice. And that gives me an opportunity to say, gosh, you're right. I was so fixated on this thing over here that I missed this big thing over here. And so it's communication, it's acknowledgement, it's respect. This sounds silly to me now, but Amanda, I can't tell you how important it was for the viability and the success of my relationship to realize that my wife and I are different people. And she's going to view things, whether it's kids or work or social life or whatever, she's going to view them differently. And my goal does not need to be to get her to see things my way. My goal needs to be to respect her viewpoint, and hopefully she'll respect mine, and we can find a way to coexist as a result. The values have to stay intact. We have to value the same things, but we don't have to walk through life adding up the score and making sure everything's equal and making sure we do things the same. We have to respect the individuality of each other.
Okay, you just blew my mind on the proactively ask. As a kinkster, one of the big things that a lot of kink people say is, oh, our communication is so much better. And I always talk about it because I'm like, that's because we ask for feedback after a scene. After sex, we solicit feedback like what could be better, what went well. And I know people say that about doing that in your relationship, having a weekly check-in, but to proactively look and ask for, hey, what came up for you this week that we should talk about where I can try better next week? Like a lot of the stuff you said, so obvious, but I would never have thought of it that way. To just solicit that feedback weekly because that's how you grow. And it gives space for that resentment to not actually have to fester, but to be out and in the open.
I can't tell you the degree to which these weekly check-ins where you're allowing your partner to be vulnerable, you're listening respectfully, you're not telling them how they got it wrong, you're not deflecting, you're validating. That is tied directly to sex. And here's how. I can be ready to go. I can be excited about sex, if the wind changes directions. Like I'm constantly, on the verge of arousal. My wife, on the other hand, she needs a certain set of circumstances to become aroused. And a big part of that is living in an environment with emotional safety where she's not up on eggshells, nervous system in activation mode, constantly worried about the next thing that's going to come out of my mouth or how I'm going to judge her, or how I'm going to question this purchase or this decision or tell her she's parenting wrong. If she can feel comfortable in her own space, that's the emotional safety piece. That's a great first step. The next piece is emotional intimacy. If I want to have good, mutually beneficial, mutually satisfactory physical intimacy, sexual intimacy, I have to be emotionally intimate first. I didn't know that for so many years. And now I've learned it's not enough to put up with my wife when she wants to talk about something. I have to initiate the conversation sometimes. I have to say, hey, I can tell something's got you. Let's take a few minutes. Let's sit down. Let's get a cup of coffee. Let's sit down. The kids are otherwise occupied. The TV's off. The phones are down. The computer's shut. Let's connect and hear what's going on with you. And I got to look her in the eyes and I got to validate her situation. If I do all of those things, she is much more attracted to me. And the intimacy piece, the sex piece, just becomes not only more available, but she's more eager and it's more mutually beneficial. One of the pieces of research we did was we found that in relationships where there was emotional intimacy, the sexual satisfaction actually increased 40% in those relationships over relationships where emotional intimacy was sporadic or non-existent. Isn't that a fascinating statistic?
It's so fascinating because I literally was just going to talk to you about the idea. I'm trying to bring up like what society has told us for so many years. And I'm trying to think as a man who is aligned with the masculinity version or even the manosphere. I imagine the first argument is, well, why would I show her my weakness? Because you hear the word vulnerable, and sometimes that's synonymous with being weak or the opposite of strong. But there's a huge benefit to it, like that you just scientifically have proven.
Well, and it goes back to what we talked about the changes for women. Listen, if you're living in middle-class America, most of us go through our days without feeling a lot of fear about our physical well-being. Our homes have locks on them. We're probably not spending all night worried about a break-in. We have some form of transportation to work that's relatively safe. Our work environments are safe. We aren't living in a cave that's potentially under bear attack. So the old school masculine, I'm strong, I'm tough, I'm a barrier between you and the outside world, it just doesn't have a place anymore. Women don't need or want that, but they still want to feel safe. And it's heartbreaking, Amanda. One of the biggest turning points in my life was when I realized I'm the most dangerous person in my wife's life. She's not under threat of attack when she goes out into the grocery store, when she goes to work, or when she goes to the kids' school. The only place she's in danger is when she comes home at night and I'm stomping through the house, exerting my dominance. And it made me realize, oh my God, I am the most dangerous man of my wife's life. And so vulnerability is a huge piece of allowing our partners to feel emotionally safe because we reciprocate the things we experience, right? If I yell and scream, it doesn't take long for my wife to be yelling and screaming too. If I share something I'm concerned about and it's deep and meaningful, and then I reciprocate by being open to her expressing something that she's really scared about on a kind of deep and emotional level, then I've created this safe environment it wasn't part of the lexicon years ago or decades ago. This is new. That's why as men, we have to turn away from, I'll just double down on the old way and that'll somehow make it better. I don't understand the manosphere stuff. We have to evolve. We have to change.
I have complained about the manosphere as a generality of like, what I don't like in society in general is, something's not working in my life. It has to be somebody else's fault. And I'm not saying the manosphere even says that because I know they're like, go to the gym, be disciplined, buy cryptocurrency, get rich. That's all on you. But I do think the reaction is like, the reason you can't be a man right now is because it's harder today because women are being XYZ. So this is how you assert dominance in the world is what they're basically saying. Like a battle from the start that your goal is to get there. I don't know where I was really going with that necessarily, but I think it's along the lines of you being the most dangerous person in your wife's life. I mean, statistically, we know that's true. Like if a woman is murdered, and you're not even saying that, but it's most likely to be her domestic partner or someone known to her. But there is so much going on in all of that. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the dating phase, specifically because I think that that's an area where women and men are lost today compared to 30 years ago. Because to your point, it changed. Before you went to a bar or you went out and met people through friends and your circle was actually quite small. So you sort of met people who were like you or knew people like you. And now it's all dating apps or a lot of dating apps and meeting online. And when you go out and meet someone, there's online arguments all the time, but in-person arguments, like, should the man pay? Is that masculinity? How does this work? Like in a starting to date, what does masculinity look like? And what does an emotionally masculine man who's not toxic look like in dating? What are they asking about? How are they talking to women? Obviously the respect piece, but how do you layer on top of that?
It's a really interesting question. We did a roundtable episode a few months ago on the Untoxicated podcast with people who were back out in the dating world after having a relationship that went through a traumatic experience with alcohol, having had that dissolve, and they were back out there. I learned so much. For one thing, men tend to, I think, be more performative. I'm not saying there aren't women that put pictures of themselves 10 years younger in a bikini. I know that happens, but I think it tends to be the go-to for men because they don't know anything else about what to offer in the way of substance. So the women that we interviewed on this particular episode talked about when the dating profile, when there's any part of your body that's exposed, your shirt's off. Like you are an immediate swipe. Left is bad, right? You're an immediate swipe left if your shirt is off. If you're holding up a fish in any of your pictures, you're an immediate swipe left because you're just saying, look at me, this performative side. I don't want you to get to know the deeper, more meaningful side. What we've just heard over and over again from people who are dating is, again, just that emotional safety piece. If you are on the first date able to have a vulnerable conversation where you're listening, but also contributing about your wants and needs, about your experiences in your family of origin. Nobody wants to go on a date with someone who's bitching about the person they just got divorced from. So I'm not suggesting that that's where you go. But if you can show some vulnerability and not be terrified when the person sitting across the table from you does the same thing, I think that's huge. The other thing I want to mention, as it relates to what we've been talking about with the Manosphere, and I think this applies to dating as well, it's really important that I think, to be successful as individuals and therefore to be able to carry our side of the load in relationships to the greatest extent possible, to stay away from focusing on outcomes. The Manosphere stuff is all about outcomes. Get rich, dominate your relationship. You got to go to the gym so that your physique looks a certain way. That's all outcome based. What people really want in relationships is someone who is embracing the experience and is along for the ride and understands that things are going to go well, but things are going to go badly as well. And how you react to that is way more important than what the ultimate outcome is. So people who have the ability to embrace the moment, be in the moment, experience the moment, it applies to dating too. If I can sit across the table from someone and be genuinely interested in who the person is, whether I have a second date or not, whether I marry this person ultimately or not, I'm just engaged in the conversation and not focused on, I've got to find a partner. This has got to be the one. It's just a lot more attractive to people to find that level of authenticity and genuineness.
I love that, not to focus on the outcome. As someone who, not to the extent of the Manosphere or anything, but I think I can be very goal-oriented and outcome-focused. Like, what is going to happen here? Like, fearful of wasting my time is actually how I would describe it. So I think that's good advice for everyone. Don't be so outcome-focused and enjoy the journey. I want to talk, we have a few minutes left here, about, obviously this is a kink podcast, right? And there is an idea out there in the world, and I speak to women about this all the time. We feel we're betraying our feminist side by being submissive in the bedroom and being in these BDSM dynamics. Have you ever encountered any dynamics like this with the people you've worked with and trying to balance the bedroom fantasy life and allowing yourself to indulge in this versus who you are in the world and staying true to your feminism side?
The thing I admire most about the kink community is the way you handle consent. I think it is an absolute abomination. People, when they're younger, when they're newly exploring sexual relationships, maybe late teens, early 20s, the way we handle consent in those relationships is whether or not one of the people in the relationship stops the other person from advancing with absolutely no verbal communication. So just to make this more concrete, if I'm on a date with a girl and I try to reach under her bra, does she grab my wrist and pull it down or not? That's consent. There's no upfront communication. There's nothing documented or even verbally documented. It's all about, is there resistance or not? And if there's not, I guess that means it's okay. And so we move forward with these really fraught dynamics, right? Where potentially, as the man in the relationship, I'm opening myself up for being accused of something, misreading a situation, being accused of sexual assault. And as the person on the receiving end of the advancement, I might be traumatized emotionally, mentally, because it went further than I wanted it to go. So I have so much admiration for the consent in the kink community. And I think as long as there is that level of communication and very clear consent, then whoever wants to be submissive and whoever wants to be more dominant, it's fine. I think it applies way outside of kink culture that we have to do the unromantic communicating so that the romantic stuff can be so fulfilling. My wife and I talk about what we want. We want very different things. Our libidos couldn't be further apart. And so we have to negotiate basically everything. And we do so lovingly. She understands my high sex drive. I understand her low sex drive. And we talk about it. And we talk about sex every single night. Can you believe that, Amanda? We talk about what we want every single night. And often it's actually gotten to the point where she's telling me what she thinks I want based on, the way my mannerisms are. And I'm telling her, I think this is what you want based on what I'm seeing from her. And when we tell people that, they're like, doesn't that kill the mood? I'm like, no, it makes room for the mood. If you're not talking, if you're not communicating, how can you possibly maneuver successfully in a sexual relationship?
I'm like practically jumping out of my seat because I understand the thought that, oh, doesn't that ruin the mood? But from my work, what I've seen, it is one of people's number one core sexual desires is to be seen. And what you're actually saying is, this is me seeing you right now. And maybe you don't get it right all the time, but at least you are also trying to see the person. I cannot imagine anything that would be more of a turn on. Like, I am literally chills. Like, how have I never thought of that? I love that you came upon that. I think that is something I want to try and pay attention to and do with my partner. Okay, Matt, we are at time, but this has been a phenomenal talk. And I just want to tell everyone, I will be a guest on Matt's podcast, Untoxicated. So I definitely head over, listen to his other episodes, but definitely check out our episode as well. I am so looking forward to it, Matt. And I guess if you could leave us with any parting words of advice for anyone who's really struggling right now with their own identity and where they fit, especially in the world of masculinity and being accepted, but also being vulnerable.
Think about what happens at the end of our lives, right? We don't think about the days we spent at the gym. We don't think about the amount of money we make. We don't think about career success. We think about the people that we love, and we wish we had more time with those people. And so those are very authentic, genuine feelings to have. Be yourself. Get connected with yourself. Be true to yourself, and then go out there and be of service. And whatever is supposed to happen romantically will happen, because someone who is of service to others is far more attractive to potential partners than someone who isolates in the gym and all they care about is the performative side of things. Don't tie yourself to outcome. Tie yourself to love, genuine authenticity, and things will work out the way they're supposed to, whatever that means.
Love it. This has been such a pleasure, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on and going deep into these topics with me. I loved your insight, so much of what you had to say. And I look forward to continuing our conversation in one way or another on your podcast.
Sounds great, Amanda. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about emotional masculinity.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might find it interesting. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Email info@thekinkconsultant.com. Until next time, keep on kinking on.